morning. Today is Monday, December the 29th. I was ahead of myself. It is the last Monday of the year. The year has flown by, actually. And a lot of things have happened this year. Like almost too many things have happened this year. And in just 2 days, we will be ushering in the new year, 2026. What was the most interesting thing that happened to you this year, Pastor Eugene? What was the most delicious thing you ate this year? What was the best song that you listened to this year? What was the nastiest smell you smelled this year? These are all the burning questions in my heart. What was the nicest thing you've heard this year? Was it Josh's clarinet playing? It's up there for me. What was the best sermon you preached this year? The next one. Thank you. So today is December the 29th, and we have a very interesting episode. This is kind of like we've never really talked about a topic like this. Well, we've actually never talked about this topic because it's a new episode. These reactions, man. Can't be reacting like this.
Did you say that? Did you give the intro already?
No, I didn't. I was getting there. The soft open is a little bit longer today. And so we're talking about Korean culture, American culture. Is there such a thing as a cultural church? We'll be talking about all these things on this last Monday of the year 2025. What a year it has been. It's been a good one. I'll tell you some of my favorite moments. My favorite smell this year was... I've never thought about this question. Where are we? I've kind of lost myself here.
Soft open.
Soft open. You are listening to the Dear Church podcast. Welcome to the Dear Church podcast, where we exist to fill your ears and your minds with the study of God to see the world as disciples of Christ. My name is Sam Yang. We're with us, Pastor Eugene. And for the first time ever, actually, no, that's a lie. She's been here, I think, maybe twice. We have Christine, how do you say Yoon? We have Christine Yoon with us here today. She's filling in for Chuntuk and Brian because they're doing who knows what. Honestly, I don't even know. So,
what's your favorite food?
My favorite food? Oh, I didn't expect this. Probably sushi or steak.
Wrong.
Wait, why?
It's a croissant.
Croissant doesn't even break top 50, I think.
No, it's a croissant.
Was that the best food that you had this year?
No, it's your favorite food.
Wait, why? I don't even like croissants. I don't even know the last time I had a croissant.
It's because it's so flaky.
Like my dandruff.
Mm.
Oh. I don't have dandruff, by the way. I don't have dandruff. I don't.
When do you go to the dentist?
When?
When do you go to the dentist?
Talking to Christine. Oh, she said once a year.
Twice a year, she said.
Twice a year?
Yes. Actually.
Oh, every 6 months.
Is
that a thing? I thought it was every 6 years.
No. You go to the dentist at 2:30.
Why? Oh, 2:30. I really like these jokes.
Okay. See, I don't know why. Okay, I'm going to keep on going until we get a reaction from Christine. Why did the Mexican take...
This is going to be a rough one.
Anti-anxiety pills.
Anti-anxiety pills.
For Hispanic attacks.
Racist.
Yeah,
racist.
She likes the racist ones.
Racist.
What about, show me... I'll give you a statement. Show me a piano falling down a mine shaft, and I'll show you a flat minor.
Oh, that's good.
No?
I don't really get it.
What works faster than a calculator? What works faster than a calculator?
I don't know.
A CalcuNow.
Oh, that's good. You don't get
She
it?
didn't like it. She didn't like it.
Are you kidding me? You don't understand that one? What do you mean calculator versus calcu now? Like now? Yo, come on, man.
Yo. It's too difficult.
The Hispanic one was good.
Mhm.
I just found out Hispanic means that you speak Spanish. Did you know that?
No,
No. Hispanic? No, what was the difference?
that's
Latin.
not right.
Latina and Latino and Latinx, they are from South America, Latin speaking part of the world, whereas Hispanics are speaking Spanish. So a Spanish person is technically Hispanic, but a Spanish person is not a Latinx. Did you know that? Also, Mexicans don't count for either of those things. Isn't that so interesting?
I'll give you a joke for smart people.
No, this is not going to be a joke. It's
Okay?
like,
No, you
dude, no, have some pride, man. You went to BU.
CA. 3 perfect logicians.
What is a logician?
People that study logic.
Oh, what?
All
Okay.
right. I guess this one Sam's not gonna get it.
No, I got it.
3 perfect logicians walk into a bar. The bartender goes, "Do you want a drink? Do you guys want a drink?" The first one says, "I don't know." The second one says, "I don't know." What's the third one say?
I don't know. Oh, so my answer was his answer.
What's the third one?
Is it
say?
like one of those things?
What's the third one say? The third one says, "Yes."
Why?
I'm not gonna tell you why. I'm gonna have you figure it
I
out.
want to laugh. Oh, I get it. Thank you for that, Pastor Eugene. No, I get it though. Do you get it? Oh, you'll get there. Read what is it? What's that C.S. Lewis book?
Is that what it is?
Man Without Chest or whatever. The Weight of Glory.
The abolition of man.
Abolition.
My goodness. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Pastor Eugene. I didn't understand that one. Yes.
But there are people that will. I have faith.
Could you just like, where should I be thinking about?
3 perfect logicians. That's the setup. Walk into a bar.
I didn't even know logician was a thing.
The bartender asks, "Do you guys want a drink?" So the first one says, "I don't know." The second one says, "I don't know." And the third one says what?
Yes.
Says yes.
Is this like one of those like it makes you think jokes or like a funny joke?
No, it's just a very simple riddle. Very simple. Like my nephew who's in like 5th grade, get this.
I'm going to ask Evan on Sunday. What do you think the third perfect logician said? You better get this.
I bet he'll get it right.
Thank you for that. So today is an interesting topic as we talk about cultures and how cultures are within churches and how cultures can oftentimes define churches. And especially now with the rise of even just, I guess the value perhaps even of multi-ethnic churches as some people see it. I think this is a very interesting topic because I think oftentimes people are like, I want to go to a multi-ethnic church. I don't want to stay in the Korean church. I don't want to stay in the American church or the Hispanic church. I want to go to a multi-ethnic church. And that seems to be all the rage now. And so just kind of talking about how cultures are interwoven into church culture or churches. And so, you announced a couple of weeks ago that our church is moving in a direction that will be welcoming in a Korean ministry because we see the need not only in our church, but also in our community, in our families. And I think there may be some questions on culture, theology, and church polity within different cultures. And so this is an interesting topic as we go towards this direction. And so just to kind of get the conversation started, if you will,
Sure.
if that's all right.
Yeah.
And so, you've served in both capacities. And I think as you draw the vision of our church, as you prayerfully consider the vision of our church, these are questions that you've considered, or perhaps just from what you've seen and experienced as well. But I guess as we begin, how much does culture play into a church? And how much of it should we consider? Like, are there such things as Korean churches or American churches or Spanish-speaking churches? Or is it simply that the people that fill the pews?
Yeah, I think we've gone over some of this stuff, but
We
there's
have.
definitely a difference that we can review between culture and what people deem as race, right? So you could be of a certain ethnicity or a background, ethnic background, but different culture or the same culture as someone else. So I would say I probably have more in common with someone that is of a different ethnic background that grew up in the States than with somebody in Korea, because my culture is American, that kind of
Right,
thing,
right.
right?
You like hamburgers, not kimchi.
Speaking of hamburgers, I think one of the questions you did ask in the soft open was what was the favorite thing I ate. I was ready to answer immediately because I had all the staff eat it with me, including yourself, and I have
Yeah,
pictures.
yeah.
And maybe Brian can post them all up.
I don't
You guys
know.
eating.
It's just that it's rougher for some.
So I got a quad patty, Five Guys cheeseburger with the works.
It's very
All
good.
the way, all
Yeah,
the way. You could just call them
yeah.
up. Just call up Five Guys and say, I would like to order a quad patty cheeseburger all the way, and then it'll be a nice hefty burger. I thought it'd be too much meat. I thought it'd be too
No,
fatty and heavy and
no,
gross.
it wasn't.
It was excellent. It was excellent.
Dare I say the perfect amount of meat, actually.
It was really good.
Yeah.
So I tried other multiple patty burgers in other restaurants, but I would say this is one of the better ones. I
Yep.
tried the triple quarter pounder with cheese in McDonald's with Big Mac sauce. Remember I told you that's one of my favorite burgers, but didn't hold a candle to the quad patty Five Guys.
Dave's Triple at Wendy's is also very mediocre.
Yeah, I tried the Dave Triple
Yeah.
more than once, and it was okay.
Oh, you did it more than once.
But the quad patty Five Guys,
It's really good. It's actually yeah.
worth trying. So if
Yeah.
you're thinking maybe I could get some protein in today and get a pound of meat in, it goes down pretty easy. You even had Christine finish it.
You'd probably have to drop like
And she's a very
$25
small
though.
woman. Yeah, she's a very
Yeah.
small woman. And she was able to finish it. Yeah, the rest of the staff finished it pretty easy. Brian being number one. What's so funny?
No, she loves it when you.
When I say what?
No, she just. Yeah. Anyway, that's a delicious burger. That would probably be top 5 foods for me this year.
I would say the cheeseburger is maybe the greatest food in the world.
In the world.
In the world, yeah. If I had to choose one food, it would probably be a cheeseburger.
Really?
It's
over a
that good.
burrito.
Over a burrito, get out of here.
I love burritos.
I'll put the burrito out, out the door. But over any food, okay?
Oh, okay. I don't know where we're at right now.
Culture,
Yes.
food,
Yep.
and I think we went into the differences in culture and things like that. Yeah, sure. Right. And so there are differences between ethnic backgrounds, sure, but culture is a big one. And so cultures can be split by traditions and languages, and I think when we're talking about the Korean church, we're not just talking about people inside this church holding to a Korean language, but Korean cultural traditions. Does that make sense? So on New Year's they'll wear their traditional Korean garb or something like that to church. I don't know. Maybe they do. Some Korean churches, I would imagine. Right?
So I guess the question is, it seems like the culture is shifting where we really, really value multi-ethnic churches. I think the argument is, God has saved people from every nation, which is true. And this is what heaven will be like, which is true. But it almost seems like multi-ethnic churches are valued over and against, Korean churches or just simply, one ethnic group church. Why do you think that movement shift has happened? And why do you think that it's almost over and against these single ethnic group churches?
And there's a lot of reasons why. We could go into maybe the progressive shift toward inclusion and diversity, but I think it's more than that, to be honest. I think it's too reductive and simplistic to think is the liberal shift to inclusion and diversity. But I think it also has a lot to do with the misunderstanding between ethnicities and culture. And so I want to get into some of that. And Redeemer Church in New York, about 10, 20 years ago, when Pastor Tim Keller was still alive, he was the head pastor there.
Yes.
And it was about 40% Asian. And I said at the time, this is an Asian church because it's the predominant ethnic background that is going to this church. It's mostly Asian Americans.
Right.
And so that's an Asian church. If you really wanted to take that definition and the language that people were using at the time, it wasn't diverse, it wasn't multi-ethnic, it's mono-ethnic and it's Asian. That's what it is. And people couldn't say boo about it. But I was saying it as a commentary. I don't really believe that Redeemer is an Asian church. But there's a lot of Asians that go. When I went to high school, I went to a high school in Battery Park in Manhattan, and that high school was made up of 41% Asian, 40% white, and 7% African American, and the other was others, right? Like Hispanic and whatnot. And I remember thinking, oh, this mostly Asians go to this church, go to this school.
Yeah.
You had to take an exam to get in. And so it wasn't based off of ethnicity or some essay you wrote. You just took an exam and then you got in. And so I remember talking with a bunch of people, and they really resented the fact that more or different ethnicities weren't represented in the school. This is my high school, by the way. And so the sentiment was there ever since I was a kid. It's been there for a very long time. But the understanding that we need to be diverse, multi-ethnic, really just meant skin color for a lot of people. For a lot of people, it was skin color because, what it didn't really mean was, and maybe it's for me, I guess I'm being a little bit critical in the sense where if you wanted to go the next level of skin color, but still stay on the shallow, it would be like food, oh, we serve curry here. We're so multi-ethnic, so that's the next shallow level, in my personal opinion, of, trying to say this is diversity or you're promoting diversity. If you really want cultural diversity, then you would have to have these traditions expressed in one place. And the reason why that's very difficult is because you have to have a dominant culture. Otherwise, it's just a hodgepodge and nothing gets done. Think about the Tower of Babel. It wasn't simply, them not having this language, but they couldn't understand each other at all. That means the traditions and the things and the movements and all the language completely changed. But let's be honest. Let's say you and I were together and we were trying to figure something out, and we just didn't understand each other's languages. We can still make it work. Try to sell me this bag that you have. We don't understand each other's language. We can still make it work.
Right? Yeah.
When we can't make anything work is if we don't understand each other at all. There's no commonality. There's no universality, right? And so that's what we really see in the Tower of Babel. It's not just simply languages, is my point. And when it comes together in Pentecost, everyone was able to hear what they were saying, and it says they were hearing them praising God. So they were not just hearing the same thing, they were hearing this uniform thing, the universal thing about us praising God. So I think the content is also important, not just simply the language when we're talking about Pentecost. And so when we move on to ethnicities and cultures, I think it is a complex animal. It's just the fact that people either reduce it too much or they think it's something that is maybe irreconcilable. So maybe you're like, everyone can get along. We could be all multi-ethnic. Or you're like, well, we just can't get along with the Hispanics or the Koreans or something to that effect.
Yeah.
I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's a weird, interesting value that we've been putting on this idea of multi-ethnic. And kind of like you said,
Can I tell you about a phone call that I got?
you can tell us about many. Yeah.
So one time someone wanted to visit our church, and they said they looked at our photos or something. They said, "Oh, would I be welcome in this church?" Because they weren't of the majority ethnic background.
Sure.
They were an Asian, okay? And then I said, of course you'd be welcome. We're just here to preach the gospel of Christ, and we're open to anyone who's willing to listen, to learn and grow and worship with us. And then they didn't show up. Okay? But the first thing that they thought of, these are Christians, by the way. The first thing that they thought of was, there's no one that looks like me. How can I worship? So it is a thing. It's a big thing.
So I guess my question then is, right, how, like, it's not simply just, oh, you look like me or you don't look like me. I think there's also an aspect of culture, right? If a lot of people, if the majority of the church look a certain way, then there's a certain culture that they bring. And so the church must be of this culture, is I think the assumption that people may make.
Some may make that culture. I mean, we had our brother Virgil Walker come to our church, and he looked at how I dressed on Sunday, and he just said, "You'd fit right in our church, in my church, right?"
Yeah.
And he was making a cultural statement, like the way I dressed. I would fit in, in
a Southern Baptist church.
In a Southern Baptist church.
You got to know how to dance, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't dance. I mean, your daughter knows how to dance.
She doesn't dance. She bobs, though. She definitely bounces.
She tilts.
She does. She does.
But, yeah, so, cultural expressions and things like that, they to diminish and say they don't mean anything is to be overly dismissive. They do mean something. But to raise it to the point where we can't get along with any culture except one monolithic, culture, that's also too narrow to the point where, well, that's impossible. Then you're going to make what's not first, if you really think that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, right.
So there are all these extremes that people go to. And I think it really does stem from the understanding, because people grew up, let's say you grew up in a Korean church. People think that they know what the Korean church is like. And this is what I try to tell the people that pass by, whether it's Darrell Harrison or Virgil Walker or Jonathan Gibson came by and I was talking to about the cultural aspects. And the latest one was, so David Filson stopped by, and I was telling David Filson about all the things that I, saw in, let's say, a Korean church. And then he was just like, you should write a book. It's like, yeah, no, there's like 1 million books written. And I've read some of them, and they're all like, so when people write these Korean American books or Korean books describing the Korean American church, it's all like they all experience this monolithic experience, this one Korean experience. And I think everyone thinks like that. So if you grew up in a Korean church, I bet you think you know what the Korean church is like, because I grew up in the Korean church. Isn't that fascinating? And so everyone that grew up in, let's say, their parents' church, and their parents' church happened to be Korean, the dominant language was Korean, the culture is Korean, mostly made up of Korean immigrants, they think that's the Korean church. And I was trying to tell people, no, you grew up in your parents' church that happened to speak Korean. You didn't grow up in a Korean church. You grew up in your parents' church that happened to speak Korean. But now, because of that experience, a lot of our, young people, especially in this area, because I don't really know what it's like to be a Korean immigrant church in, let's say, Boise, Idaho. I just don't know. But I do know in the major metropolitan areas, like in LA or New York, we have these large Korean churches, and people that grew up in these churches think they know the Korean church. And now we have like TikTok and Instagram and all these social media feeds of these Korean American, call themselves second gen or whatever it is, these young people. They think they know the Korean church. And I gotta say, I don't think you do. I think you know what it's like to grow up in your parents' church that happened to be Korean. I don't think you know what it's like to grow up in the Korean church. In fact, I don't even exactly know like what that is, to say it just very simply. It's like saying I grew up in the American church. It was like, well, which one? You would immediately ask, well, which one?
Right.
Did you grow up in a Baptist church? Did you grow up in a Presbyterian church? Did you grow up in a Pentecostal church? You don't just say the American church unless you're saying the American church at large, broadly speaking, has this singular characteristic, right? And so you could say there is one characteristic that permeates throughout all American churches, and then you're going to speak about the American church at large when that comes. But when people talk about the Korean church or some ethnic church, let's say you're not Korean listening to this, and you grew up in the Latino church or black church or some other non-white church that you want to talk about, because that's what people really want to talk about. People just say it like it's just this one singular monster, and it has all these characteristics, and they're just basically all the same, like at least 99%.
Yeah.
They're all the same characteristics. I'm like, no, it's not. No, it's not. So having served under multiple Korean churches, I got to tell you, there are some similarities, but there are a lot of differences in a lot of Korean churches. And I also have to say this, your understanding of the Korean church isn't the Korean church in Korea. Korean churches in Korea are not like the Korean churches in America, and they're not like the Korean churches in Uzbekistan.
No.
They're just not.
No.
And so in Uzbekistan, the Korean churches look like churches that are from the 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
It just does, because that's when the Koreans immigrated there, and they brought their church there, and they didn't change.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go to Uzbekistan, that's what the Korean church looks like there. Where's Borat from?
Kazakhstan.
So Kazakhstan has a huge Korean population.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you look at the Koreans in Kazakhstan, they look like they're the Koreans from the 1700s.
Mm-hmm.
They still have that same dress, and they still look very dark. I don't know. They don't look like Koreans from
K-pop,
right? Because they kept that culture when they first immigrated.
Yep.
And they had to, almost like a time capsule, preserve that. You know why? Because they didn't want to lose their culture.
Yep.
They didn't want to lose their identity, because they couldn't fully integrate into the Kazakhstani culture, and they didn't look like them exactly. And so they kept their own culture. What happened is they pretty much time capsuled themselves in Kazakhstan. So I'm telling you this because I want to tell you that's how I see the Korean American church. The Korean American church, the immigrant church, not only are they all kind of different, but they're like the church in the 70s and 80s, because that's when the most of the Koreans immigrated. They immigrated in the 70s and 80s, and they started churches here then. In the 70s and 80s from Korea, and came to America, and the church looks like a church in Korea from 1970 to 1980. That's what it looks like. The way they worship, the way they dress, all of that, it looks like a church from the 70s and 80s. If you go to church now in Korea, it's different. And now because of the internet and globalization, a lot of it is now kind of intermingling. But I got to tell you, when you were growing up, is my point. When you were growing up in the 90s and the 2000s, that's not how Korea looked like. And, you know, the Korean church in Korea looked like versus the Korean church in America looked like. But all these people have this one idea. This is what the Korean church is.
Mm.
And they say this like an absolute all-encompassing statement. And I really think that they're wrong. I disagree. It's not. So when you're saying Korean churches, first of all, let's get that definition right. What do you mean Korean churches? Are you talking about Korean immigrant churches that have been here for the last 50 years, that kept that culture for the last 50 years, almost like that time capsule thing, and the children growing up here resenting that? Because again, the children want to integrate, right? They know the language, they know the culture, they want to integrate. And there's this like dual pressure from society and integration, and also their parents and holding on to certain traditions and mores that they grew up with. And so a Korean immigrant child growing up here would have had both poles, right? Are you saying that that's monolithic for every Korean church in the world? Obviously not. Obviously not, right? So when we're talking about Korean churches, I think what people really mean is Korean immigrant churches in the metropolitan areas. That's what I think they mean. Like in LA or New York, maybe some parts of Jersey and Connecticut.
There's a lot there. Thank you for that breakdown. Not the dance, but just the breaking down of that definition. Interestingly enough, there's two interesting things that Brian can keep or destroy.
Brian? What?
As he edits.
Oh, okay.
The Boise Korean Baptist Church. The lead pastor is from New Jersey. He went to Nyack, Drew, Princeton. He was a pastor at Chodae. And now he serves in Boise.
Yeah, because you gotta export.
Yeah.
We export them from here. So
yeah.
we export our own Koreanness, the Korean Americanness. That's proving my point.
Yeah.
We're exporting our Korean Americanness into the places like in Boise, Idaho, or the Midwest or whatever, where they wouldn't have had this kind of similar experience where you have a mass influx of Korean immigrants.
Yep.
And like, in the last, like, from the 70s to 80s or something like that.
Did you like how I supported your argument with the fact that seemed out of bounds, but it was actually on point the entire time?
Yeah, I enjoyed that.
Thank you. Second of all, I think in terms of what you were saying, and this has to do with, this is just kind of, again, what you were saying, but in a different, I guess, light. People say right now that Korean food in New Jersey is more Korean than Korean food in Korea, which I think is really interesting.
Who's saying that?
Just people. If you keep your ears to the streets, that's what people have been saying. And the reason is, and it's exactly what you were saying. People that immigrated here 50 years ago tried as hard as they could to keep the traditional foods, even customs alive here to pass it on to their future generations. If you go to Korea now, everything is westernized. They're trying to be more Western and more Western. And so a lot of their foods are actually like a hodgepodge of Western influence and Korean influence. Whereas here, we want to preserve the Koreanness of something as much as possible. And so kind of like you were saying, is really interesting. Even with food, you can see that in New Jersey or even in LA, because in Korea, people are experimenting. Here, we want to preserve.
That's true. That's a true statement. In Jersey, you may have best Korean food that you can get in the world that is Korean.
Yes.
Even more than Korea to a good degree. In Korea, there are still pockets of places. Let's say you wanted,
like in the countryside or something.
Like the seaweed soup, in Korea.
Yeah.
And then boom, that's like the authentic seaweed soup, something like that, right? And so that's because, again, immigrants came and they held to it. If you go to places like Atlanta, Georgia, they have a much younger Korean immigrant population.
Yes.
So the people that are immigrating now to Atlanta, Georgia are Koreans that are maybe in their 20s and 30s.
Mm-hmm.
And they're the first generation Koreans.
Mm-hmm.
So the food that they bring is more like the food that's in Korea now.
Yep.
So if you go to the Korean restaurants in Atlanta, Georgia, it's much more like the Korean foods that you will see in the major metropolitan areas in Korea, like Seoul or something like that, right? But then you go to Jersey, you'll get Korean food like you'll get in the countryside.
Yep.
Like authentic,
old
school Korean. And so you can actually see the differences. I'm making your point here too. The differences in when you immigrate, and what culture you actually bring, because time moves on in countries, but for some reason when people immigrate, it's like a time capsule.
Yeah.
And they kind of get frozen in that time when they come and immigrate. So again, when people are talking about Korean culture and Korean churches, I want them to understand this dimension. When you came and when you immigrated, when your parents or your grandparents, because it was my grandfather first who immigrated into the States, and then for you, it might be your grandparents or your parents. I'd be surprised if your great great grandparents came first? Because
No, it's just my parents.
I'm saying if
oh,
anybody's if you're Korean, I don't think anybody's great grandparents came first because, well, maybe the newest generation, but
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
talking about pre 1965. Koreans were unheard of.
Mm,
So when my grandpa came in the early 70s, he was like one of the first Koreans here. And so it's like before that, Koreans just didn't come before the Korean War.
yeah.
Right? It's post Korean War. And so and when it so happened that the United States opened up immigration post 1965. And so post 1965, a ton of immigrants came into the States, like from Arab countries, India, Korea, China. Well, China because of the railroads before, but China even more so.
Mm,
Japan was a little bit before because of World War II,
mm.
but then Korea was around 1965. But you'll see a huge influx of immigrants and immigrants bringing their cultures into the States post 1965.
You know what's really interesting? Korea is really hot right now. Like, and the reason why I'm saying that is because just like what you were saying, prior to the 1960s, people didn't know where Korea was. Even when I was in high school, I would say I'm Korean. They'd be like, "Where is that?" They'll be like, "Oh," and then people that would know, like, "Oh, are you like north or south?" Haha. Like that's what people ask, right? But what's interesting is now this next generation of kids that are in high school, Korea is really, really popular to the point where kids in high school are gifting each other like K-pop calendars and stuff. Like these students are not Koreans. They're doing that, and then they're asking, and then I was like, "Oh, what is that?" They're like, "Oh, it's a K-pop group." I was like, "What?" Like, "Hey, you're Korean. How come you don't know?" I was like, "How would I know that? I don't know anything about these K-pop groups, but it's becoming very popular. It's interesting."
I saw this one.
And Bulldog, people love that stuff.
Isn't it on Netflix where there's a K-drama now with like 3 Brazilian women going
You know,
to Korea?
it's
It's real, huh?
it's a Brazilian dating show where they are meeting a Korean boyfriend. So it's like 5 Brazilian women or something like that want a Korean boyfriend. It's a reality TV show.
Because K-pop is so huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, like you said, my mom too, when she was growing up here, they wouldn't know what Korea was. They would only know China and Japan.
Yeah. Yep.
Are you Chinese? No. Are you Japanese? No. What are you, Korean? Like, what?
Yeah.
They were confused. And
Yeah.
so, people's knowledge of Korea have come a long way.
So one of the reasons why I really appreciated this breakdown is because I think it's helping us understand how we even view what we in our minds would consider to be the Korean church versus the American church. In your definition and the way that you were presenting it, would you say that then there really is no such thing as the Korean church or the American church, but there is the church and then there are people that fill the pews? If there are more Koreans that fill that church, it may be that the culture of that church may lean a little bit more Korean in the sense of the foods that they eat, the language that they speak, the games that they play, whatever it might be, versus an American church where if it's more of this other culture, then that's the way that this culture of the church would lean. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I made a comment that confused people in the past, and I said that, you can speak Korean. It doesn't mean you have Korean culture. I'll tell you, as Korean culture, I think just a handful of people in our church are Korean cultured or predominantly Korean culture.
Sure.
Some people think, like, if I say like oppa or something, that I'm Korean cultured. It's like, no, that's like Korean American culture. Like, that's not Korean culture. Korean culture is different. When you speak Korean, it's different. It's just different to the degree where you see the world differently. And I don't know exactly how to explain it because I'm always talking from the outside perspective. But when I look at you, you can speak Korean well and you understand Korean culture to a good degree, but you're not Korean. To disappoint your parents. I hope your dad's like, he's wrong. He's Korean. He's a Yangshi. But you're not Korean.
Yeah.
You have some Korean, understanding, but you're a Korean American. You're an American with some Korean knowledge. That's what I think. I'm more American and less Korean than you are, though, if I were to do that balance. But I only think like maybe less than 5 people and if we're talking about our church, less than 5 people in our church are Korean.
Yeah.
That's what I think. And I could name them for you, but I don't want to embarrass them.
It's not embarrassing.
These are people who speak Korean,
Yep.
understand Korean, and think Korean. And it doesn't matter if you think in Korean. I'm saying you think Korean. And so I'll give you just a very, very trite example. Again, I'm somebody from the outside looking in. When Koreans speak Korean, there's multiple levels to honorific and casual. So people don't understand this. So if you just learn Korean like a Korean American would learn Korean, you only think that there's 2 levels, the honorific and maybe understand the super honorific. There's a super honorific, the honorific, and then there's a casual, okay? That's not true. That's not true. That's not how Koreans think. Koreans always try to slip in a casual into the honorific just to see how far they could go. They just do. So if you are super honorific, you would never end a sentence with, let's say, something like ga. If you know Korean, there's a newer word, a vernacular that appeared within the last like 30, 40 years. It's ga, right? It's like K-A, ga, but it's double kyok, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's ga. So if you ask a question, you end it with ga, okay? This wasn't in Korean's existence before. This is a newer thing. You could ask that honorifically to a good degree, but it's almost casual. But you could say that to your parents. But if you said that to the president of the United States, you'd be kicked out of the Oval Office, that kind of thing. Like you could say it honorifically, meaning I could say it to someone older, but you could say it to someone older if you're friendly with them, but not older if you're not friendly with them. But if you're not friendly with them and you don't really respect them, you could still use it. So there are all these dimensions and multiple levels to it that Koreans go through. And it's almost Japanese in the way, because Japanese are all about that stuff too. So people just think very simply it's honorific or maybe super honorific, and casual. Korean Americans think like that. But I'm telling you, that's not how Koreans think, okay? And so when Koreans talk to me and they know I am not Korean, they'll mix in all this stuff. And because they know they can do it. But they're always testing. They're seeing if you
I
understand.
think
Korean.
some people genuinely don't know. Like, meaning I've heard conversations where someone was speaking to you in Korean. They had no business speaking to you in Korean, and they use a not honorific way of speaking, which they should not have used because they genuinely don't know, but they don't know enough that to the point that they still say it. And it kills me.
Yeah. And so there's all these, like, there's multiple levels. This can get really tiresome to the non-Korean. But Koreans just live it. It's like you're living in the water. There's no tiresome or you're just living in it, right? Americans have a culture too. And when non-Americans come, they're like, this is also tiresome because there's all these things that we have to wade through, but we do it so naturally and easily because we grew up here.
Yeah.
We grew up here, so it's not a big thing, right? And so, in America, let's say in the States, if you don't like something, the way you express it is different depending on who you are, how people perceive you, and how you want to be perceived. That's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you don't like something and you were talking to your friends. It's like, yeah, this sucks. You would say something like that. This is terrible. Mm-hmm. This is garbage. If you don't know them that well, you wouldn't necessarily say that.
No.
But if you don't know them that well, but you want to put yourself out as someone who doesn't really care, you would say that.
Yeah.
There's all these things and these nuances, even in American culture, is my point, that we just take for granted because we're in it. But again, because I'm someone from the outside looking into Korean culture, I pick up on some of these things and then I point it out. But to the Korean, it's just like, that's what it is, But that's why in Korean culture, the first thing that they ask you is, how old are you?
Yeah.
The first is your name and then how old are you? Because that's everything.
Yeah.
Because if you're 1 year older, it changes the whole dynamic of relationship.
Yep.
You will never be friends with someone who's 1 year younger than you.
Right.
You're just not friends.
Mm-hmm.
You can only be friends if someone's that same age.
Yep.
But you can be friends with someone that's older than you, but they're still older than you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Do you know what I mean? Even if you're this cool, casual person, you're still older than them. So there is always going to be some cultural dynamic that's going to play a part in, let's say, even friendships in Korea or America. And so when people talk about now let's get back on track. When people are talking about like cultural gatherings like schools or churches, when cultures come together, people don't necessarily want another culture to come into the dominant culture because it confuses what's already, we're already having a trying time here. Why are you adding in other elements that could possibly confuse or, stir the pot?
Yeah.
Right. And so that's what it is. And so it's the same thing. If you're in a Korean church and you start bringing American culture in, people are like, what are you doing? And what the Korean church did for the last 40 years was they created something called the English ministry.
Yes.
And the English ministry was, you go off on your own. We'll send you people, but you're not a part of our church, so to speak. You can worship in the same building. We're together because we're family. We need to take care of you. And we want you to go to church. We want you to learn as much Korean as possible. But, it's better than not understanding anything. We'll give you an English ministry. So
Right.
we have something called the English ministry in a lot of Korean immigrant churches. And so, now when Korean churches, let's say an immigrant church looks at, let's say, a newer church, and it happens to be a Korean person leading it, they'll still call it an English ministry, because that's how they see, let's say, a second gen or third gen in their own language, third gen church. Does that make sense?
So I think you bring up a really interesting, I guess, new topic in a sense. If the language is different, if even how you view things is different, if your worldview is different simply because your culture is different, can't the idea of church also be different between Koreans and Americans, or people that have grown up with Korean culture versus American culture? And so I guess the question, and you just brought this up, right? This idea of, hey, we're struggling. This church is struggling, not our church in particular, but a church, we have our own issues. We have our own battles. Why are we adding a different aspect to it to even make our battles even greater? And so I think someone could even think about that with the addition of an English ministry, or even with the addition of a Korean ministry to an American church. So aren't there different views of what a church is, and how can those be reconciled?
Yeah, I think what we have is truly then a multicultural church. I don't think just because you have people that speak different languages, especially not just because people have different skin colors, does not make you a multi-ethnic, multicultural church.
No.
It doesn't. You still have a monolithic cultural and ethnic church. You're American. You all speak English. You bring in curry or some your ethnic dish doesn't make you a multicultural church. In potluck, let's say, I'm gonna bring my bulgogi, and that's gonna make it a multi-ethnic potluck.
Yeah.
That doesn't make you a multi-ethnic church, is my point.
Yeah.
And I don't think so. Again, the confusing part is because we're a country that accepts these immigrants. And with that immigrant culture, you accept some of the things that they bring, not just the food, but even some of the cultural insights that they bring. That's what America has been since they opened its doors in 1965. Good, for better or for worse. I'm not going to argue if it's good or bad, because I think it's both. But those people that are saying entirely that it's good, you don't know what you're talking about. Or those people that think all entirely that's bad, you're probably racist. But those things are things that I just don't, think that people see. And they should see this. And so when people are afraid to bring another culture in, that's great, because you have your own traditions. You don't want your traditions to be messed with, but you also have to understand that every church has worship expressions, and that those expressions are culturally expressed. I'll give you an example. I gave an example a long time ago about a church during communion. What they would do, and this is a church in Latin America. During communion, this church would get the church's cat, and they would tie the cat on a post. Not on a post. They would leash the cat.
Okay.
And tie the leash onto a post.
Okay.
And one time a visiting missionary came and said, The church service was beautiful. I loved it. I do have one question. Why do you tie the cat every time you have communion? And the guys there were like, I don't know. Why do we tie the cat? So you have to figure it out. You went and asked. You asked the oldest people in the group, and so a lot of them didn't know until you asked the really old people. It's like, oh, we tie the cat to a post during communion because when we first had communion, there were no walls, so all this dust would come in, and when the dust would come in, the cat would run around everywhere, causing disruption in communion. So we tie up the cat.
Mm.
But now here they were indoors, no dust, everything's very clean, and they still tie up the cat during communion. A lot of the cultural expressions that we have are from traditions, and maybe we know why, maybe we don't know why. It's my point. Maybe we don't know why. One thing that we see when we can get those things exposed is if we have someone from an outside perspective come in and check in on us. So the outside missionary came in and just asked a simple question, right? So when you're so, when you're so invested in preserving culture, time capsule, or we don't want any, let's say you're the Korean time capsule guy, or you're the American born, you're like, I don't want anything Korean in my church, or something like that, right? When you're so invested in keeping culture, you don't invite anybody to maybe inquire why you do certain things
Mm.
and testing out why we have traditions, why we have certain traditions, why we have certain cultures. And I see that there is a good in, let's say, there is good that happens when you invite people in, maybe not of your culture, but to worship with you. It's not like this missionary or pastor wanted to change that tradition. He didn't say, don't tie the cat up anymore. It's stupid. Right? He didn't say that. He just, oh, that's interesting, right? And but now they all know why they tie up the cat.
Mm.
Maybe the missionaries thought it was stupid, but maybe those church people didn't think it was stupid. I don't know. That's the point. I don't know. But when you worship God, there is an expression, and that expression is cultural, like the way you sing, the way you move, and things of that nature. And so I always pick up on it, and I try to tell people what I pick up on. I should say I always try to tell people what I pick up on. And let's say the worship sway. You know how a lot of people sway during worship songs?
Yeah.
That wasn't a thing until very recently. You know
Mhm.
where you see the sway? You see the sway in U2 concerts or Coldplay concerts. And so you see the sway in the Coldplay concerts and U2 concerts, and that was brought into the worship session. I don't think it was exported from the worship to U2 or Coldplay, but I do believe U2 and Coldplay took a lot of our cultural worship, traditions, and they brought it into their music as well. So there's like maybe a back and forth, but that sway wasn't there. Imagine in the Puritan era, the sway happening.
Mm.
Just unthinkable. Or in the Victorian era, like in churches, like people swaying through the music. That's not true. And so, now with the drums and the nice electric guitar, and you got the nice synth going in the background, like people can sway, that kind of thing. And those are things that I pick up on. Is it necessarily bad or good? Maybe, maybe not. Obviously, I am more of a conservative on certain matters, so
Mm.
I do have a take. I don't think it's necessarily good that we sway. But if you sway, I'm not going to judge you. My point is, you go to church and all these people are swaying. I'm not going to be like, look at these YouTube fans. I don't say things like that, but
Yeah.
I won't even think it. I'll just be like, that's just not my cup of tea. But there are things that you can pick up on. You pick up on things because you're not from that culture, and then you kind of come in as an outsider, and you go, "Oh, I wonder why people do that." I think sometimes a different perspective helps. So that's just one aspect that I'll share before you may have some other things to follow up on.
No, I could just.
And so, okay, so when we're inviting other cultures, I always wonder what people mean by that. And so, let's say we wanted to have a Korean ministry
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
It's not a Korean ministry, so to speak, where we want to start a Korean church. The Korean ministry is directed to the people that are directly in need. So we see a need. So this is how I see the church, okay? You see a need that the people have and you supply that need. I don't have to call it Korean ministry. I could call it the people that are not integrated into our country that well that still need help ministry.
Yeah.
I could call it that, but I'm not going to, okay? It's fine because I don't think it's something that I should get all hung up on. But if I can help them understand the gospel, if I could help them worship, if I can help them do all these things, why wouldn't I do that, right? And let's say there's another part that I was thinking about, which is a little different. But let's say you wanted to take care of your parents, and this is an aside. I hope that's okay. Let's say you wanted to take care of your parents, and your parents are old. They want to come to their kids' church, but they just don't know anything about our culture, the American culture. And the closest thing that they see is sometimes we have kimchi in fellowship. That's the closest thing that they see to Korean culture in our church.
Sure.
Why don't I have some interpretation for them? I don't see why that's a bad thing, to be honest. And so that's how I think. If I can help the people that are in need to worship God with the saints, that's a ministry for me. Because I take that from Acts chapter 6, when the Hellenist widows weren't getting their fair portion. Hellenists were Jews, man. They weren't like, they weren't Somalian or something like that. They weren't like from a completely different culture and ethnic background that didn't understand. They were of the same faith. They were Jews in a different land, but they didn't get the distribution. That means even that small divergence from the primary culture left them out of the distribution. And so what did the apostles do? The apostles picked 6 really devout and godly men. And if you look at all their names, like Nicanor and stuff, if you look at all their names,
Greek.
they're Hellenist names.
Yeah.
They're Greek names.
Yeah.
Because they can, appeal to them.
Yeah.
So he didn't pick, a sole Jewish guy. He picked a guy who was familiar with their culture. And so that's I think that's a Bible thing. I don't think it's a Korean thing. I don't think it's an American thing. I think that's a Bible thing to support those in the church that need that extra help.
So I guess my question is, though, and I think some people, if we are to bring this to our specific context, with the addition of a minister that would specifically minister to a Korean-speaking population, if you add Korean Americans, right, who let's just say even are more Korean than American, doesn't that change our culture? And I think what people could be worried about is the fact that, hey, whoa, didn't we just come away from this Korean church? And I know that we kind of lay the groundwork of why that's a faulty understanding, because not all Korean churches are the same. But I guess just people, as they're thinking through this, could think, didn't we just get away from this whole Korean culture, this whole Korean church? Aren't we an American church now? Aren't we finally an American church? Why are we adding a Korean ministry to make us even more Korean? We're going backwards.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of faulty things there. Speaking of faulty things,
Yep.
And understandings, I don't know where to start from.
Well, you already talked about how
Yeah.
even just the idea of a Korean church is your simple understanding of a metropolitan Korean congregation that you grew up in, right? Not every Korean church is the same. And so even just thinking like, hey, we just got away from the Korean church is faulty in understanding, because no, that's not true.
Yeah, I think what happens is when people associate, and this is not universal. This is not. I know it seems as though I'm going to speak in broad swaths, but it's not universal. A lot of people, when they speak about the Korean church, they speak from a place of hurt.
Mhm.
And that's because I see that in TikTok, and I see that, I don't have TikTok, but I see,
on Twitter
on
or
Twitter
X.
or X or Instagram or something like that, or YouTube. People complain about the Korean church. And so a lot of people have been hurt in their parents' church, and they don't want to go back to a place where they will experience the same hurt. They thought
Right.
they were done with that.
Right,
not
right, right.
experience that.
Right.
I think that's a very sad thing. And, I'm going to be frank, the people that I know that went to Redeemer, they thought the same thing. They didn't want to go to a Korean church. So they went to Redeemer, and they ended up making that an Asian church, but whatever. And I think that's very unfortunate. It's unfortunate that you were so hurt by the church, but at the same time, I think it comes from a place of a lot of misunderstanding. A lot of misunderstanding. And if you would permit me, I'd like to go over, again, if you're listening, go over some of those reasons why I think they are misunderstandings. Again, we shouldn't paint with a broad brush to all Korean churches either. And Korean churches aren't monolithic in the sense where all Korean churches are like this, that kind of thing. And we also need to realize that when we left the Korean church, so to speak, you didn't leave the Korean church, you just left your parents' church. And so some people think by us going back, we're going to experience what we experienced in our parents' church. Well, some maybe, some not. But I think it has a lot to do with misunderstanding because of the cultural and language differences, not simply because that they were wrong. So some people think that they were wrong. The Korean church is bad. Instead of attributing a lot of the hurt perhaps to miscommunication and to some cultural differences. And so you just didn't see it the same way. And instead of saying culturally it's expressed this way, and it was expressed to me, I just didn't receive it well because a lot of the culture that I had received growing up is from school and from, because they grew up in public school, is from public school, it's from my friends, and it just didn't mesh with my parents' culture. And so I think it has a lot more to do with miscommunication than, let's say, doctrinal, if I may.
Hmm.
And I think that's quite unfortunate that when you now think of the Korean church, again, a misnomer, but the Korean church, you think of it monolithically and you think of it as just a one big blob of evil or hurt. And I don't think that's true. I just don't think that's true. I think that there's a culture that was pervasive, perhaps within Korean immigrant churches, that may not have been healthy, but it doesn't mean that it has to be in every Korean church going forward either. And it doesn't mean that just because you invite, let's say, Korean people to come to your church, that that's the culture that they have to bring. I just don't think that's true. I think you'll have to tease it out and tell me which ones you don't like.
So then, with this understanding, and I think this is kind of a great way of tying the things together that we've discussed. We've talked about just Korean culture in general. We've talked about the Korean church. We've talked about how adding a Korean ministry, let's say, might change or might not change the culture of a church. How do we then view what our church will be going through in the next couple of years, in the terms of, in the sense of adding on a Korean ministry, or a ministry that is geared towards ministering towards those who may speak Korean? How are we supposed to kind of think through and pray for and support this ministry?
Yeah, I think we should be like the ministry we preach like on a daily basis. We should be the truly inclusive. We should be. We should be people like in the Bible, biblically inclusive. I'm not
Mhm.
just talking
Mhm.
about the secular
Inclusivity. Yeah.
inclusivity, but I'm talking about biblically. And it's like, again, going to Acts 6, um, and saying, not treating everybody fairly, not them not even getting part of the distribution. That's kind of messed up, but that's what happened, right? But I think we should think of it as service,
Mm.
and we're here to serve others, and those that might not fare well without our service, we should try to help the weaker brother in need. I have a huge problem with a weaker brother than dictating um, what the majority should do.
Mhm.
So I have preached on that, right?
Yep.
And I
The
think there's a
tyranny of
big
the weaker
problem.
brother, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's a big problem with that. If the weaker brother is now going to dictate terms, that's why vegans don't dictate what we eat on during fellowship.
Mhm.
They're the weaker brother. I wouldn't let that happen just because we have, like, let's say 10% vegans. We don't. But if we had 10% vegans, I wouldn't make 100% of the food vegan.
Right.
To me, that's not how things work. And that's the tyranny of the weaker brother. And Paul talks about it in First Corinthians. We don't do that. In the same way, I wouldn't do that for the Korean ministry, where they would get to do that. But we should be able to stoop down and help those that can't, let's say, integrate well. Those that want to just spend time with their grandkids on a holy Sunday worship and see their grandkids I think we should be able to help them. I think we should be able to serve them. I think that's part of the fifth commandment: honor your father and mother. I think that's a huge thing for me, and this is what I've been telling people. That's part of being a Christian. It's not just part of being an immigrant. I think that's secondary, honestly. It's part of being a Christian. And as a Christian, we should be able to help those. I think a lot of people have fear and anxiety when it comes to any kind of um, potential integration of different cultures because you might change.
Might
Our
be
church might
difficult.
change.
Might be rocky.
And I don't think we should fear that. I think what we should be doing is we should be praying and we should be fasting and we should be studying the word together. And, you know, um, and I think when we do that, that's the universal commonality in the church.
Mm.
This is what the elders kept. So going back to Acts 6, there's a lot of wisdom that you could garner from Acts 6. The apostle said, we'll focus on the word and prayer.
Yeah.
Because that's the universal thing that they should be focused on. That's the one commonality that the church has that you should never go away from. You should be focused on word and prayer. That's what the elders were going to do. That's what the disciples were going to do. So we should hold to that. I told the staff this, but I actually don't mind, and I'm not scared. I think the anxiety is it's just not really well founded. There's no real reason to have anxiety of accepting anybody of any different culture in our church or any church. So this past Christmas, this is yesterday from when we're recording, because we're recording on the 26th.
Yeah.
Yesterday was our Christmas service. And afterwards, I met this really old man. So someone brought an elderly man. He had a walker and he was walking by. You could tell he was primarily Korean speaking.
Yeah.
But I guess he studied the States because he mixed in some English with his Korean words. He was like well in his 80s, maybe 90s.
Yeah.
And he was asking me if I studied English literature. Because, I talked about some literature on this. And I
Yeah.
said, no. He was surprised. He's like, well, how do you know so much about English literature? I was like, oh, it's just something that I like to do. And he's like, what did you study? I said, I studied business. And, everybody laughed. I don't know why that was funny, but they all laughed. Like,
Is it like a smart person joke again?
no.
Like a logician?
I don't know.
Okay.
The logician one you should have gotten.
I still
It's
don't.
disappointing.
No.
Anyway, but he was saying, I haven't heard a sermon that was so refreshing to the ears in a long time.
Mm.
And so he was really refreshed by the sermon. And he really enjoyed it. Again, not English speaking, culturally complete Korean, but the word of God was the universal.
Mhm.
That was the common factor.
Hmm.
I need to make sure that that's what people understand.
Mm.
And then if another culture comes in, they see it from the other side, they can maybe ask why we tie up the cat in a pole during communion.
Mm.
And I wouldn't be afraid. It's like, that's cool. That's fine. Someone did ask that. Someone did ask, like, why we wear gloves during communion, the elders.
Mm.
And I said, it's just a hygienic thing. It's not a.
I thought it was a symbol of purity.
There's that.
Yeah.
The white tablecloth too.
Yeah.
It shouldn't technically be white. It shouldn't. It should reflect the colors of the calendar.
Mm.
And so there's all that. You could take it for whatever symbol you want, but it's hygienic, and white is always a symbol of purity and cleanness. But
Mhm.
I don't think that's necessarily important when serving communion bread. But I think what's more important is, the other symbolisms that's there. So I hope that that's the case.
Yeah, I think, like you had mentioned, I think maybe I don't even want to say fear, because I think people that may think this way, they would potentially think, well, I'm not scared of it. I don't think it's a fear. I think it's maybe a concern, maybe something that is of worry that our church culture will change, that our church culture will change for the worse, perhaps. That people that are of a different culture will come in and kind of reinforce the culture that we had tried so hard to get away from, in a sense. I think that's the concern, or that's the worry, I think.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. So we come from a place of hurt, and we just don't want to go back.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
we believe that the Korean culture was a place of hurt.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's quite unfortunate. I think I may be going out of bounds here, but I think that's why a lot of people left the Korean church and went to places like Redeemer
Mm.
because they were hurt by the Korean church, or so they thought.
No, I think so. I think so.
And so they never wanted to go to their parents'
Yeah,
church again.
I think
So
so.
the parents are the one always yelling at them to go to church.
Yeah.
Go to church and go to this church and learn some Korean.
Yeah.
And so they were really hurt by that. They wanted to be free. And then here they found this, really easygoing non-Korean guy telling them about Jesus in a way that, really resonated with them, that resonated with the hurt. And they were the hurt and they needed healing, that kind of thing.
And this is a complete sidebar. I have not really heard of non-Koreans bragging about the fact that their church is multi-ethnic. I've only heard Koreans brag about the fact that their churches are multi-ethnic.
I think it does. I'm sure that there are places, but it does stem again, I believe, from this. So I think when you display hurt, it can be contagious. It's like the whole transgender thing. Although I don't want to equate the two.
Yeah,
We
no,
really,
yeah, I don't know.
but no, there's something called social contagions,
Mhm,
and hurt can also be a social contagion. That's my point.
mhm.
So when you say, here's my experience from this background, it's monolithic. People are going to be like, I was hurt too. I was hurt by the Korean church. My parents forced me to go to church when I was little. Yeah. And so did every single parent that were Christians. They would force their kid to go to church. But no, I had to also go to Korean school. Oh no, the horror. I'm not trying to downplay maybe some real trauma that some people experience. But when a social contagion is to say everybody experienced this trauma to such a great degree, it now paralyzes them, right? Um, this is not what I want us to think. I want us to think in a more nuanced way when it comes to cultural matters like this, especially because the purpose of it all is to minister, is to be ministers, and so we want to be able to minister to people, especially if they are going through true or deep trauma or tragedy. And so that's what I would hope that people would do. Um, I just, like what you said. Yeah, I think so. I could see why you're saying that. I'm sure that in different cultures there were different things, but the Irish had their Catholics, so
Mhm,
people are like, I'm Irish Catholic.
mhm.
You go to church, it's like no, but they're Irish Catholic, that
Right,
kind
right,
of thing.
right.
And so those are things that people just had in their culture. And in our generation, what is pretty predominant in our culture is this resentment of Korean Christian, because you know people used to make fun of us for that.
Mm.
Every time, my friends would say, every time they saw like those 12, 15 passenger vans, they go, oh, there goes a Korean church bus,
Yeah.
right? Because they used to, all these Korean churches would use these 12, 15 passenger vans
Yep.
to carry people through. And if you had like a yellow bus, man, you were a big Korean church. Like you could
Yeah.
afford those yellow buses, right? And now we have those like square shuttle buses, but I don't think Korean
Yeah.
churches really use that.
I mean, and it could possibly even stem from like assimilation, because I think as Korean immigrants, your goal is to assimilate. And if you go to a Korean church, it means that you really didn't assimilate. Whereas if you go to a multi-ethnic church, it means, oh yeah, you are now living the American dream. And so I think there could be that aspect of it as well, perhaps.
Look, I don't fault anybody for going to we should make that clear. You don't, if you're Korean, you don't have to go to a Korean
No,
church. You
no,
don't even
that's
have
not
to
what
go
we're
to a
saying.
predominantly
No.
ethnically Korean church. That's
No,
not the point.
no.
You go to any church you technically want, as long as they're preaching the gospel.
Yep.
And for us, it's you have to be reformed, and so you want to be reformed, and you want to have a reformed service, confessional, reformed, and believes in the three forms of unity, things like that. That's what you want. It's great. Then keep to it, and I hope those will take precedence over what people look like.
Yeah.
I hope you don't call churches and be like, "Will I be accepted here?" Just because you don't. I hope if I were to go to church, I don't care what they look like, but if they hold to the three forms of unity, they're preaching the gospel, they're confessional, they're reformed. Man, I should be excited. Holla, like there is a reformed church out there that I can finally be a part of.
Right.
By holla, I mean hallelujah. Okay.
Ah,
Not like holler or halal food.
I think generally, if you say holla, we don't generally use that as the shortened version of hallelujah. I think generally. So I think
That's why I needed to clarify.
I-
That's what I mean by holla.
see, even the way that you just said it just now sounds a little. But yes, thank you for that clarification. I think again, yeah, we're not trying to say you have to go to a Korean church or you have to go to multi-ethnic. I think the point of this episode, and I'm glad the conversation went this way, is I wanted to kind of break down this idea that we have of what a Korean church is versus what an American church is, what the differences are, and address some of the concerns perhaps that people may have with the addition of a Korean ministry now.
Yeah, I don't think I answered all the queries that people might have had, or I didn't go comprehensively on the differences between cultures and expressions in church. But I hope we keep the main thing, which is we are a confessional,
Yep.
reformed
Yep.
church,
Yep.
and we hold to the three forms of unity in interpreting the Bible and knowing what salvation is for us. We worship the triune God, and it goes down the list like that, right?
Mhm.
And so I hope that's what we do, and I hope that will take precedence over everything else, especially when it comes to ethnicity. And so, if you want to know what our church is about, yeah, it's not about a bunch of Asians coming together.
No.
It's about people who love the Lord that come together. And yeah, we have a lot of non-Asians that come too because of that. We just so happen to start off from a Korean immigrant church. So a lot of our guys from the original church are Korean American, so to speak. So we just happen to have that group because we are from a Korean immigrant church, but we are not a Korean immigrant church, and I hope people understand that, because I think the bottom line, the main important thing is we keep on preaching the word and the prayer, just like the disciples did.
Thank you, Pastor Eugene. I think that's really helpful and hopefully answer some of the questions that we may have as we go to this new year. We have a lot of exciting things happening to our church, in our church, from our church, with our church. What's the word? Through. We have a lot of interesting and not interesting, a lot of exciting things happening through our church this upcoming year. And so, again, I think this is a call for us to continue to pray and continue, like you said, to study the word, continue to grow and mature ourselves, and to continue to grow as the church gathered and scattered. And so I think this will be a wonderful year, and I'm very, very excited. I mean, I think this edition with Pastor Sean coming in is going to be great. So
yeah,
it's very exciting.
Yeah, again, we didn't go exhaustively into the cultural differences and nuances, but hopefully we went through some basic stuff, and maybe a book will come out when I'm like in my 60s, which is like just a few years.
Can I write the foreword?
No.
Can we promise that right now?
No, I'm pretty sure I asked Philson to do that.
Is there like one after the book? Will you write like a post word?
Yeah.
Can I do that?
Review.
No.
You can review.
No, can I do the thing where there's like can I do the introduction? There's always something. There's multiple people that write stuff. So he can do the forward. Let me do like a brief introduction. Okay. Cool. I'll save my jokes for then. So thank you, Pastor Eugene, for this. Having Christine in here really shifts the energy in a bad way. She reacts to everything that normally Brian and Chuzak would not, and it kind of gets me off my game a little bit.
Yeah, Chuzak and Brian are used to it. Brian doesn't even listen. When Brian's here, he's just doing something else on the computer.
He's writing his Subsplash.
Yeah.
Or what is it called? Substack.
Substack.
Yeah. He's a writer now, so he's a writer. But thank you, Pastor Eugene, for that clarification. And we hope and pray that this is a blessing and helpful for our members. So we thank you for listening to this episode of the Dear Church podcast. We hope and pray that this has been a blessing in your ears. Fight the good fight, finish the race, keep the faith. Peace.